well, let's make a start. Thank you all for coming, and it's really lovely to see you. And I know that some of you have been to all of these webinars, of which this is the 12th out of 14. So you know, it's really, really good to see that level of engagement, and thanks very much for being part of this. Right, well, let's get started then. For those of you who are familiar with the format now, I guess this will be very familiar to you, but just to let everyone know how this is going to work. What I've done is I've recorded about a 15-minute presentation for this webinar, and in fact, I rather sort of foolhardily decided that I wanted to do this one by myself without any sort of other people. And partly, actually, it's because this paper authoring tool has been my baby for many years now, and it's really great to see it coming to fruition. So it's quite technical, and not sure how many other people actually know enough about it to be able to present it. But anyway, that's part of the reason, and partly just because I don't mind doing things by myself. Anyway, you'll see a 15-minute recorded presentation, and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion, and then we'll just wrap things up. And actually what we may do, depending on how we get on with the discussion, was to, if you have questions about the tool that I can demo stuff for the tool for you, then we may try that and see how that goes, because it's very much a sort of hands-on webinar, this one. Okay, so it's a discussion format. Please post any questions that you have in the Q&A box, not in the chat. Excuse me. So you'll see that at the bottom there's a Q&A. Just put them in there, and then everyone can see them. Then what I'll try and do is answer the questions that seem to be most popular. So feel free to what's known as upvoting any questions that you want answered, so that we get to those first. But I'm hoping, with plenty of time for discussion, that we may even get to all of them, but you never know. Use the chat box to share thoughts and reflections. All of this will be saved, and this is recorded. Obviously, I will answer as many of your questions as I can during the discussion, and as I say, we'll see if we can do some demos if that's what you'd like. We do keep a record of all the questions asked, and we share these on Open Science Framework, and we will aim to answer any that we don't get round to in the session itself afterwards. So do feel free to send in lots of questions. So we record the webinars, and it's great that some of you are coming at all hours of the day and night. But for those people who can't, in particular, make it at this time, we want to make sure that everyone can access it. So we record the webinars, and we upload them onto YouTube. So they're on the CBC channel, and we also make the slides available on the Open Science Framework, and we'll email you the links to the recordings and the webinars so that you can see those, and do feel free to share them with any of your friends and colleagues who weren't able to attend. Right, okay, with that all under our belts, let's get started, and we're going to start with the video, which is about 15 minutes, which includes a very short demo of the paper authoring tool and explains why I decided to build it. Hi everyone, and welcome to this video on the paper authoring tool, which is one of a series talking about the Human Behaviour Change Project. The Human Behaviour Change Project is a programme of work that aims to use AI and machine learning to extract information from published evaluations of behaviour change interventions, to then create a model of behaviour change based on this information, and to use this model to predict outcomes in new scenarios. For more information about the Human Behaviour Change Project, go to the link shown in the caption. This video will explain what PAT is and what it offers, and it will give you a short demonstration of how to use it. PAT is a free online tool for writing up randomized trials and pilot trials. It prompts you for all the information that you need to provide. It stores this information and it uses it to produce a Word file that you can then edit to meet journal requirements or to suit your own narrative style. It also produces a machine-readable JSON file with all the information you entered. This can be saved as a supplementary file with your published paper so that all the information in your paper can be read automatically by a computer without the need for a human to extract it. Pat has a facility to ontologize your paper. What this means is that whenever you're referring to a construct or measure, you can link this in Pat with the unique ID for that item, which is stored on the web, in an ontology, in the ontology that holds that ID, so that users of your research know exactly what it is you're referring to. Don't worry if that doesn't mean anything to you. I'll be doing a separate video on the use of ontologies in writing papers later. So why does the world need Pat? Well, the answer, I imagine, will be obvious to anyone who's written up a randomized trial or a pilot study, or who's ever conducted a systematic review of this kind of study. The fact of the matter is that even with the excellent guidance now available, such as the Consort guidance from the Equator Network, writing up trials is really hard and time-consuming. And it's extremely rare for journals to accept write-ups at the first attempt, or even often the second or third attempt. And that is even after the research teams have spent literally months honing the paper before submitting it. So, but then even when articles are published, they're very often fail to include crucial information or report it in a way that actually can be used effectively. So we found in the Human Behaviour Change Project that manually extracting information from narrative reports at the level of detail that's really needed is incredibly time-consuming and expensive. And the way the information is presented makes it extremely hard to automate the process using natural language processing. So just imagine how revolutionary it would be to have all this information in papers already available in machine-readable form. Finally, research integration is a huge problem because researchers often don't make it clear exactly what it is they're referring to when they use terms. The same term is often used for very different things and different terms for the same thing, and ontologies help to solve that problem. So how do you use Pat? Well, getting started is really easy. You simply go to the Pat website and register as a user. Everyone who's going to be an author on the paper has to do this, and then you're ready to start your first paper. You create a paper and invite your co-authors. Then you can add or delete co-authors at any time. And the information you enter is saved as you go along, so you and your co-authors can actually be working on the paper at the same time, although I'd recommend that you work on different parts of it to save confusing each other. You and your co-authors then use what we're calling wizards to enter the information required. And you'll see that these wizards are organized around the usual headings of introduction, methods, results, and discussion, but they break these down into their component parts. At any time, you can preview your paper, download it as a Word file, or save the machine-readable version as a JSON file. And I strongly recommend that you download the JSON file regularly, just in the very unlikely event that the version stored in the cloud for some reason becomes unavailable. You can just then easily restore it from your saved version. Let me just take you through the basics of using Pat. When you go to the Paper Authoring Tool website, this is the home screen that you'll see. And if you haven't registered, then you go up here where it says sign up, and you'll see a sign up screen where you put in your email, set a password, and give other sort of details. The email that you have for the system doesn't have to be the same as your public author email. That's what will be put on papers for contact details. Put in any competing interests that you want to report and your ORCID ID. This is if you're not familiar with this, then look it up. It's a unique ID that all researchers can sign up to and should use. And then you click on Create Account and the account will be created. Since I already have an account, I'm now going to go to, let's say, go back to home again. I can go to login and I can log in with my account, and I'm going to log in with a dummy account that I've set up for this purpose. When you log in, if you've not got any papers, this will be blank, and you can click on Add New Paper to create a paper. I'll just do that now for you, and you can see that when you do that, it asks you, is this a full-scale RCT or a pilot and feasibility trial? Full-scale RCTs can have anywhere between 2 and literally any number of groups. Pilot and feasibility trials allow you to have just one group if you want, if it's a non-comparative single-arm trial. You put the title in here and then you click on Create Paper. This is where, if you have saved a JSON file for a paper and you want to import it, you just click on that and it will import from wherever. It'll just ask you for the file name and the location and it'll import it. So I've already done that and done a little bit of work on the paper, which I'm now just going to show you. And you can see that the first thing that comes up is the contributor. So if I click on this tab here, this is where all the wizards are. And what you can see is that you've got all the sort of metadata here and the abstract and the contributors. Then you've got all the wizards relating to the introduction section, method section, results section, discussion and conclusions and references and so on. And where it's green here, this is where I've entered enough information that it is satisfied that there's enough there to be going on with. So it'll automatically tell you where there are bits that need to be added. So if you look at the contributors section, for example, you can add a contributor, you can invite someone. I won't do that now, but there'll be more instructional videos on this coming. You can edit your own details. This one gives me an alert here, which you'll see is really handy because it tells you when there's information needed. And the problem here is that I haven't designated what kind of a contributor I am. And you can allow people to get access to the paper as authors, which is what I am. So that's now gone to green. But you can also allow non-author contributors to do stuff. So for example, if you've got someone who's working on the paper in a sort of technical manner, but they're not actually going to be counted as an author, then you can include them. You could also put people who you want to review the paper before you send it in or finalize it. So it gives you that option. If you're an author, then it'll use what's known as the credit system for you to be able to specify what role you played. This is really important, and I think everyone should be doing this. It's now becoming pretty much a standard. So if I just enter some stuff here, and then you finish that, and that's done, and now that alert has gone away. I won't go through all of these, obviously, there's not the time, but it gives you an idea of the sort of the basic structure of it. A couple of things to note are that the abstract is a really good place to start when you're entering data here, not least because it gives you an option to talk about what your study groups are. And this is where you can add the names of your study groups and so on. And you can, as I say, it says here you can specify up to 4 study groups, but in fact we've updated it so you can have as many as you like. And what you'll see is we have various bits of text, which are long text, and you just write the text that you want, or you can import it from Word or whatever word processor you use, which is what I would recommend for any bits of long text. Just like any form, if you've got a long bit of text to enter into a form, it's always better to put it in a Word file and then cut and paste it, or copy and paste it in, rather than enter it in there. So you probably want to start a Word file at the same time as you start this, and then add stuff in like this. But there are other kinds of fields like this one, which is just a short field, and it says short. What is the short label for the setting where the study was conducted? Short labels are really important in PAT. They're used to build text using PAT's sort of text building facility, and they are really important labels for providing a succinct reference to some key thing. So here we've got short label for where the study was conducted, and I put a hospital-based smoking cessation clinic in Warsaw, Poland. Similarly with participants, and you'll see what happens then if I show you what that then looks like in the preview, which is the same as the Word document. You can see you can paper options here. You can preview it. You can export Word. You can export JSON. If I show you what it then turns out like, it's going to create this abstract for you with this block of text that you already put in. It'll just take that verbatim. But where you're putting in these short labels, what it will do is it will create text using a sort of standard format for you. I'll also show you here what the Word document looks like when you export it. See, it's actually quite nicely laid out and everything. I'll also show you, while we're at it, what the JSON file looks like, so you can see what a machine readable version of this is like. Now, this, to any computer geek, will look quite familiar. It's a standard format for structured or semi-structured data, and it actually contains literally everything, every bit of information that you put in the paper, but in a form that any computer can find. And this is where things like short labels come in, because it'll be looking, when someone's doing a systematic review, they can look for your short labels. And I'll mention a little bit more about that a bit later on, because when you ontologize these and use labels and IDs that come from ontologies, then it just makes it massively easier for these things to find what they're looking for. All of that is saved as you go along. That will now be saved, and it says, well, I'm 84.9% complete on this particular paper. And at any time, you can download the JSON or download the Word file. And but let's say you've decided that you finished it. Well, you go to it, you download the Word document, and then you can edit it as you see fit to make it fit the requirements of the journal, bearing in mind that if you do anything that is going to change the fundamental information that's in it, and this isn't wordsmithing, then it's a really good idea to update that in PAT as well. And obviously you can keep updating in PAT as often as you like. So that gives you an idea about how to use PAT. Just a few points to finish. First of all, PAT is just as useful for designing studies and writing study protocols. In fact, I'd recommend you do that, since it can prompt you to include study features that you may otherwise miss or have forgotten about. Secondly, if it's too daunting to start by writing the whole paper using PAT, which I can understand that could be the case, you can use it for just parts that you want help with. For example, describing your intervention or writing your research question. Whatever information you include will be in the JSON file and able to be read by an automatic review program. Thirdly, we've set up a PAT users group to support you in your work, and we will use this to keep you updated on new features and improvements and to let you know about webinars and masterclasses. You can use the users group to let us know about problems you're experiencing so that we can help you to overcome them. Okay, everyone, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. Right. Okay. That was a very, very quick look at this tool that we've created, and I see that there's some questions already starting to come in, and let's get to them. Okay. First of all, these are great questions. Let's start with this one. How do we get a buy-in from journals and editors to implement it? Right. So I was, until very recently, the editor-in-chief of the journal Addiction, and I managed to persuade the how PAT actually got started, but it was called Addiction PAT. And by the way, part of the story for that was that we had this wonderful journal manager called Pat, who worked on the journal for several decades, and I thought it would be a good tribute to her to make the acronym fit her name. So the Society for the Study of Addiction put a lot of money into the initial work on PAT, and since then it's been funded by the HBCP and in fact other groups as well in the UK and the United States. For which I'm really grateful. And, you know, obviously going forward, there's huge amounts of work still to do. So as we develop and build it and increase functionality and so on. So we're always looking for further funding to do that. But and I'm also funding that out of sort of consultancy fees that I get and so on. So so having been editor-in-chief of the journal Addiction and still being involved in the journal, that's one journal that I know has sort of buy-in. And I think and there are others I know that are interested in my field. I think what we need to do going forward is to, and I will be doing this, will be to work with journal editors and publishers to incentivize them to kind of incentivize their authors to use the tool, because you can probably get a sense that if people are using this tool to write up their studies, then it actually means, in theory, it should mean, and I'm pretty confident it will mean, that a lot of the work, the sort of drudgery work that you have to do when you're reviewing a randomized trial that's been submitted, it's already been done, because you know, PAT has already, in a sense, pre-screened the paper, because the authors will have seen themselves what information is there and what information is missing. So you know, it should hugely improve and speed up the review process as well as the writing process. So I think journals will be keen to do it. There are other initiatives of this kind already underway. There's nothing quite like PAT, but there are other things, other tools that people can use that are aiming to improve the writing up of papers. And I think, you know, as these develop, rather like bibliographic databases like EndNote and Reference Manager, they will become the norm. So that's my hope anyway. Thank you for that question. There was a sort of technical one about just the users group email. We'll send you the details of that afterwards as well, so that everyone has that. Interesting question about is there a danger of being flagged for plagiarism when using PAT? I don't think so. I don't think it should make it any worse. I mean, I think that you're writing essentially the job in writing up a study is to convey the details of that study as accurately, comprehensively, consistently as possible, using a language that can then be brought into evidence synthesis, so that people can combine the results to build theories and so on and so forth. So I don't think that there should be anything there. One of the things, in fact, I think that should be an advantage of PAT, of course, is that at the moment we have this unfortunate system whereby still many journals have their papers behind paywalls. Now, okay, that's probably going to continue for some time to come. But what the journals can't do is to put the JSON file behind a paywall. So if you're doing a systematic review and evidence synthesis, and you're not as well resourced, perhaps because of your circumstances or where you are, and you don't have access to the paywalled version of the journal, you've actually still got all the information, literally all the information that's key to the paper in a JSON file, which will be and should be freely accessible. There's nothing that publishers can do, I don't think, to prevent that, and not even that they would necessarily want to. Okay, so that's I think that should be fine. There's another couple of ones on the sign up. There is an issue that I've noticed, depending on where you are in the world, with not getting the email from the sign up when you do the sign up, and we're still looking at that. What it is, it's that there's an arms race going on between spammers and email servers that are trying to prevent the spam getting through. And sometimes that can cause problems, and we are looking at how we can address that. But I can reassure you that even if you haven't got the email, you are still signed up. But what I would suggest to anyone, any of you on the call, is that if you have any problems at all with that, just email me with my email address, robertwest100@gmail.com, and I will make sure that we get that sorted out as quickly as possible. Because I mean, at the moment, Pat's got I think about 120 users, but of course, going forward, we're looking at potentially thousands, and this is an issue that we need to make sure that we get sorted. But thanks for that. One of them is there's another question that I think people are very interested in is, are there any plans to create templates for non-RCT and studies and pilot studies and other kinds of studies? And the answer is yes. Well, there's two issues here. One is the issue of templates, and the other is expanding it to non-RCT type studies, including qualitative studies. And so with the templates, one of the, I think, again, things that we can do, and you can do if you're a PAT user, is to create templates for certain kinds of studies, even ones that are like domain specific. So for example, my field is smoking. There's certain things that we pretty much always have to measure or should measure in a smoking RCT. Well, let's put those in PAT for the baseline characteristics, for example, like the nicotine dependence score. There's obviously things like age, social grade, et cetera, et cetera. You can put those all in, and then when you start a new paper, you just import the template and then build on that. So that is definitely potentially a big labor-saving device. That, and my intention certainly, when we've got over the initial sort of launch of HBCP and its materials, and I've got a bit more time, is to help people by providing templates and then letting people know about those templates so that they can upload them, and we could put those on the HBCP resources website. So the other thing is obviously about extending it to different types of studies, and obviously there's vast numbers of studies that we could that we have in our world. the next set of studies that we'll be extending it to will be non-randomized evaluations of interventions, because that's really easy. In a way, you could almost do that with Pat yourself, because the only difference is you've got these different groups, and instead of them being randomized, they're chosen in some other way. You just explain how that is. So that will be a pretty easy one. Other ones will be things like, I mean, cross-sectional surveys are very, very common in our field, and correlational studies. And again, that should be a relatively easy one. Ones that are more difficult and challenging, I think, are things like time series analysis. I don't know how many of you have done time series analysis, but there's an awful lot of different ways in which you can do a time series analysis. And trying to sort of make a formula for that you can readily put into a tool like this, it's not impossible, and will be done, and I'm sure it will help when people are doing time series analysis, but it is more challenging and very technical. Anyone who's done a time series analysis will know how technical it is. There's lots of decisions you have to make about how you deal with autocorrelation, the seasonality, and so on. And there's a lot of sort of degrees of freedom in how you analyze the data. So that's challenging. But probably most of the types of studies that you or I would do are relatively easy, and it's just a matter of me sort of getting the time to do them. Qualitative studies, also potentially challenging, because there's, again, so many different types of ways that you can analyze the data and approaches that you can use. However, I think we can, working with my qualitative colleagues at the Journal Addiction, I think we can go a long way towards supporting people who are doing qualitative research using a tool like this. But it's not something that I'm a great expert in, so that definitely will need cooperation with a qualitative researcher. And so if there's anyone on this webinar who might be interested in working on that with me, then do let me know. That would be great. So another question is, will it be flagged as an AI-generated manuscript when submitted for journal publication? It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's shades of ChatGPT in there, and I think it will be. And the idea is that when you as this evolves and becomes more sort of normal for people to do it, that people would say, this manuscript was prepared using the paper authoring tool, or indeed, if there are other tools that get developed, ones like that. And I would hope then that would be seen as a plus by the journal, because, and it probably be quite evident in a way, because there'll be certain hallmarks of things that have been covered in the paper that often get omitted. So you'd think, well, this is actually quite a well-written paper. But yes, I think in the methods section, I would put something like, this paper has been produced using PAT. But it's not really AI generated in the sense that, of course, ChatGPT would be AI generated. You're still doing all the work, all the meaningful work, the creative work. All Pat is doing is providing a tool, if you think of it like a souped up word processor almost, with a bit of predictive text in, to help you to do that, and to make sure and to prompt you so that you have all that you've put in all the information that's going to be needed. So it's AI assisted, I think, would be the way I would think of it. And actually, it's not even that. Where does algorithms begin and AI end, or algorithms end and AI begin? It's it's more algorithmic and analytic at this stage than AI. I imagine that, you know, down the line, when you're writing the introduction, you could, in fact, you know, I would probably recommend you have a look at either ChatGPT or Bard, which seems to be slightly better for academics, or Elicit, if you've not come across that. Elicit, E-L-I-C-I-T. That's a sort of academic version which actually provides references. Yeah, to sort of make a start on the introduction and give you ideas as to what sort of things to put in it. One question is, do we have to subscribe separately to the user group? Depends what you mean by separately. I think if you mean sort of as individuals, you can, you know, it's just an email. So whoever's, you know, if you're on an email list and you know, more than one person has an access to that email address, then that's fine. So it's just whatever works for you. But probably I would do it individually. Because you know, you're not, believe me, you're not going to get spammed with emails from this user group, because I don't have time to spam everyone. But you know, the idea really is to create a sort of a support network really for people, and we'll see how it goes. You know, if the more and more people who use Pat, obviously, the more support network there will be. And I'm thinking, you know, if and when something like this becomes very widely used and popular, you know, it'll be more like, you know, our user groups, and then there might be sub-user groups, like groups who work in a particular field or who do a particular kind of study. And that's how these things tend to sort of evolve. So, okie doke. So let's see where we've got to now. We've got, right. So Michelle, hi. This looks like a great way of making sure that key bits of information are not missing from the paper, but who decides what information you're prompted to provide, given the complexity of understanding behavior change and evaluating if something worked? Is there an argument that those harder to quantify bits that are helpful to understanding could get lost? I think so, but I think so far my experience is that, in fact, there's enough that there is enough flexibility and generality in the prompts that are provided for you to be able always to say what you want to say, and to be prompted to say what you want to say. So at this stage, a lot of Pat is free text. You're just entering stuff that you would say. It's just reminded you to say some stuff. In fact, you know, what I'm going to do, because we've got a little bit of time, is I'm just going to share my screen, if I can, and show you an example of that. So hopefully you can see Pat on the screen, but this is the cytosine paper. But let's, for example, have a look at the discussion. So, oh, that's great. That's sort of, it's a typical sort of demo thing. It's possible that it timed me out. Let's right. Well, rather than try and get that fixed, what I'll do is I'll just talk you through it. I've never seen that before. But if you look at the discussion, it'll prompt you for the things that you really do need to talk about, however you want to talk about them. Like, you know, the summary of the results, theoretical implications, practical implications. And it'll prompt you within that for things like in the limitations, things that people often forget about, like what are the possible ways in which the studies are limited? It could be the sample size, it could be the sample representativeness, it could be the measures, it could be, you know, a whole range of things, and it will prompt you for that. But it doesn't stop you talking about other things that you would want to talk about, and ditto in the introduction. So you can, the plan is to make sure that you can always say whatever it is you want to say, but the prompts that it provides you will ensure that the sorts of things that journals are expecting and should get, and people synthesizing the evidence are expecting and should get, are always covered. So, okay, next one is, how are we doing? Okay, the next one is, will papers be, hang on a second, will papers be automatically picked up from the tool, or does it feed a database for future meta-analysis? As things stand at the moment, this is standalone, a bit like you would use EndNote or Reference Manager, and then you send in your paper to the journal, and you'd send in the JSON file as a supplementary file, which journals would allow you to do. As time goes on, and this becomes more, this kind of thing, whether it's PAT or another thing like it, becomes more commonly used, my expectation is that we will have pipelines between these tools and the journal's submission process, so that you don't have to send, once you've entered it in PAT, it will automatically then fill in a lot of that submission information for you, which is quite tedious. Having just sent a journal back to a paper to Addiction, I'm reminded of, it's a lot of work, and you don't want to do it more than once. So, you can imagine a situation where you write your paper with PAT, you press the submit button, and it sends all the information that's needed. There'll probably be other information that it wants, obviously what reviewers you want to choose and that sort of thing. But yeah, that would be great. But at the moment, it's a standalone tool. But I think you can kind of get a sense of how this ecosystem will change with these kinds of tools, and how it will take a lot of the drudgery out of writing papers and a lot of the sort of really hard stuff. I know, many people, probably most people, find it hard to get started in writing papers. The idea here is to, ease that process, not to make it more difficult, but to ease it and make the quality better. So, I mean, it's also worth bearing in mind, of course, that the version that you produce using PAT will be a draft, and then you have the Word file, and you'll need to wordsmith it to make sure, because there'll be certain things, it's just impossible to completely mimic the kind of, well, I suppose you could put it into ChatGPT and see if it can do it, but there's a lot of things in the way we communicate in papers that at the moment anyway are really hard to sort of automate. Okay, Ellen, that was Emma. Ellen asks, it would be interesting to learn more about the short labels, and also, oh yes, how PAT is connected to other parts of the BCIO, which I didn't include in the demo. So that's rather important. Thank you for that, Ellen. Right, if I were more confident that I hadn't broken PAT, let me just see if I can get it up. I can show you how that works, but okay. Hang on 1 second. Okay, this seems to have worked. So I'll show you how it works. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. So let's look at the constructs and measures, for example, which I mentioned in the video. Now, you've got all these constructs, and it's really important in papers, although a lot of people don't do this, but PAT prompts you to do it, to separate out constructs and measures. Now, in a lot of things like sex, age, and occupational group, it doesn't matter because we don't care, in a way, how we've measured it. We just assume that we've measured it. But there are certain things, for example, like cigarette dependence, where the construct is not the same as the measure. So what we have here you've got your short label, and let's call it cigarette dependence. You optionally can put in a long label and even an acronym. And then you can say, okay, do we want to ontologize this? And at the moment, it links it up with OLS, which is the ontology lookup service. We're just going to change that so that we also add BCIO. But everything in BCIO that's published goes into the ontology lookup service. And the reason why I used OLS in this version is that it contains all the other sort of biomedical ontologies as well. So if you didn't want to use BCIO, there were other ontology terms that you wanted to use, then it's got all those there. So let's say I go yes, which I've done here. And then what it will do is it will, you can go to the OLS let's go to the OLS, there it is. Let's put cigarette dependence. And it's got nicotine dependence. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that I want to use that. Okay, so this is the ontology lookup service version. If you've not used it, by the way, do have a look. It's really great. And then all you need to do is you click on copy, right? And then you go back to your paper authoring tool, which at the moment I can't do because it's hidden. There we go. Right. You go back to the paper authoring tool, and all you'd have to do is just basically put it in here. Oh, you have to put the, sorry. You put the full web address in here, and there it is. And the system will look up the term, and it will look up the definition, and so you can just check that that's what you want. That is now ontologized. So that construct is now in the paper. It's linked up. It doesn't matter what term you've used here. You can use whatever language you like, because the ontology entity here has been fully specified. So that allows you to use your own terminology, and you can do the same for your measures. So that's a simple way in which you can just ontologize all the things that you need to in your paper. So you have a short label, which can literally be anything you like, but all that is meaningful in your paper. But then you can link it to the ontology item, and there it is, and that will be in the JSON file. So any automated evidence synthesis program will automatically be able to find it. So it'll be able to see, right, what are all the entities in this paper? What are all the BCTs that this person used, for example? What are the characteristics of the population or the setting in ontology terms? It's all there. No one needs to code up anything. It's all automatically covered. So I think it should help be quite a labor-saving device. Well, I'm conscious of time, but we're okay for time for a minute. So Susanna has asked, does it also have citation and referencing tools, or do you need to add those afterwards? At the moment, you need to add those afterwards. So you'd write the paper without your references, or just put in a little place or a marker for your references. And then when you've got the paper how you want it, then you'd use EndNote, or I use Zotero. Again, it's a technical thing. It's not difficult to do, but it would require a little bit more integration between this and whatever the bibliographic programs are that you're using. And one of the issues there is that obviously different people use different ones. If you haven't used Zotero, if you don't use it, by the way, I highly recommend it. I used to use EndNote, which is also pretty good, but Zotero's got a bit more functionality and is particularly good for ontologizing things, because all you have to do is go to the web address, the website, and it's got a nice web browser extension which allows you to copy that into your database, and it's free, by the way. So that's another big thing. Jean asks, could this be used to generate abstracts to submit for presentations? The answer is yes, it could be. In fact, I think, as I mentioned in the at the end of the video, I think a lot of people who are using it now are using it for bits of papers. So they're using it, for example, to describe their interventions, even if they're not doing a study on the interventions, just using it to describe the interventions, or to create the results tables or baseline tables. So sure, I think it's there as a tool to be used in whatever way and however flexibly works for you. Bear in mind that, of course, it is at the moment very much geared towards RCTs and pilot studies, but still the headings that you've got in the abstract are there for they're pretty standard headings for most journals. Okay, I'll just do I think Sarah asks, is Pat available for anyone to use? And the answer is very much so. Yes, it's a completely free tool, will always be free. And at least as long as I'm involved in it, it will be free. And it's there for the community. So have fun, just try it out, mess around with it. I don't think you can break it, even though I kind of sort of did. Remember, it's a research tool. And it's not a substitute for being, a researcher. It's a way for you as a researcher to do your job as effectively as you can. So there's a lot of technicalities to it, and some of it will be quite challenging because writing up papers is challenging. Once the current spate of work dies down, I'm going to be creating more videos and training videos on specific parts of Pat. So watch this space. If you join the user group, I'll notify you of that. And then finally, is there a risk that university students use Pat to write their coursework dissertations? I really hope so, because it's not cheating. It's like using a calculator. And I remember in the old days, people said, "Oh God, people are going to use calculators to do calculations." Yeah, that's a really good idea. Slide rules were quite a good idea. A ChatGPT ultimately, potentially, and illicit, they're tools for us to use, and they can help us to so that's and it's not doing the human, it'll be you. So with Ella's going to put a couple of slides up, I think, for us to wrap the thing up. So first of all, thank you all for coming to this, and I hope you found it interesting and have fun with the tool. If you've further comments and reflections, but if you've got any further comments, then scan this barcode, 3D barcode, or click on the link that's been posted in the chat box. The next one is on the 24th of May, next week, and that will be introducing the theory and technique tool with Mary Johnson and Marta Marquez, and that will be very interesting. If those of you who've not seen the theory and technique tool, it's a really cool tool for mapping BCTs onto mechanisms of action. And then the big date, 6th of June, in the afternoon, 2 to 5 in the UK, is the launch of the Human Behaviour Change Project Knowledge System, where the team shows its wares. I'll be talking a little bit about Pat, a little bit more about Pat, but you'll hear lots of interesting stuff about, including, for example, the prediction system and more demos of that. So do get involved and do come to that. You're very, very welcome. And you can sign up with that QR code. And then Susan has asked me to plug and promote this, I think, which will actually be very popular. So you might have to book early. This is a part of the CBC's UCL Centre for Behaviour Change International Training Programme, and it's really going into, it's a sort of masterclass on the new BCT ontology that is the development of this very widely used BCT taxonomy. So that's the 6th of October, and again, you will be sending details of how to register, but that's that. And I think that's it. And again, thank you all for coming. You'll be getting information about the slides and so on, so you can click on these links to get more information about this. We've got a YouTube channel which we're developing. There's going to be a training program for the BCIO, which we've got some of them recorded so far, but there'll be loads of others. So that's it. Thanks very much, everyone. And do get in touch if there's anything you want to discuss further. Lovely. Okay, that's it. Bye.